The morning sun had just begun to rise over Naval Air Station North Island, painting the runway in gold and steel. The low hum of engines, the clatter of boots, and the crisp shouts of orders blended into the rhythmic symphony of military life. Pilots checked their aircraft. Engineers barked status updates. Ground crews moved like clockwork. Everyone had a role. Everyone knew their place. Everyone except the woman walking quietly along the edge of the flight line. She didn't belong, or at least that's how it seemed. Dressed in plain jeans, a navy blue jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low, Elena Brooks could have passed for anyone. A civilian contractor, a staff assistant, maybe someone lost looking for the cafeteria. Nothing about her attire hinted at authority. Yet there was something unmistakable about her. A stillness, a groundedness that made people step aside without realizing why. Elena liked it that way. At 42, she'd spent her life serving in shadows, first as a combat diver, then as a SEAL team commander, and now, after years of hard-earned respect, as a colonel in Naval Special Warfare Command. She was among the rare few women who had shattered barriers in the world's most grueling branch. Her record spoke for itself. Multiple deployments, hostage rescues, and missions classified beyond public record. But today wasn't about glory. It was about leadership. The Pentagon had tasked her with overseeing a joint Navy SEAL air operation, a high-stakes mission requiring perfect coordination between air and ground units. The assignment brought her here, to San Diego, for a week of preparation before deployment. She could have arrived with ceremony, an escort, and salutes. Instead, she chose simplicity. She wanted to see the base as it truly was, not how people acted when they knew a colonel was watching. As she walked, she scanned the flight line, eyes sharp, movements controlled. A C-17 transport was being loaded nearby. A row of Seahawk helicopters sat ready, mechanics crawling over them like surgeons. The salty wind carried the scent of jet fuel and sea spray. She took a moment to watch a young crew member fumble with a fuel hose. His hands shook slightly, and she could tell he was new. She walked over, knelt beside him, and tightened a valve herself. "Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty," she said softly. The young man blinked, startled. Yes, ma'am." "Sorry, ma'am." "No need to be sorry. Just be sure. Every mistake here costs lives." He nodded quickly. He didn't even ask who she was. She stood, brushing her hands, and continued walking toward the briefing hangar. Her meeting with the base commander wasn't scheduled for another hour, so she decided to observe quietly. Leadership, she believed, began with listening before speaking. That's when she heard the voice. "Hey, you can't be here." Elena turned slowly. A man in a flight suit was striding toward her with the confidence of someone used to owning the space around him. His mirrored aviator sunglasses reflected the sunlight and his attitude. The name patch on his chest read Mercer. Captain Ryan Mercer, she recognized from his personnel file. Decorated Navy pilot, top of his class, a natural in the cockpit, and, as she'd heard in whispers, just a little too proud of it. "Excuse me?" she asked evenly. "This area's restricted," he said sharply. "Civilian staff aren't allowed near the aircraft during prep. Who cleared you here?" She studied him, tall, broad-shouldered, early 30s. The swagger in his stance told her he was used to being in charge, at least within his squadron. She saw in him something she'd seen many times, talent overshadowed by arrogance. "I'm not civilian staff," Elena replied calmly. Ryan scoffed. "Then what are you doing out here dressed like that? You're not base security, and you sure as hell aren't flight crew." A few nearby airmen paused their work, watching the exchange out of the corners of their eyes. Tension crept into the air. Elena could have ended it right there, flashed her credentials, revealed her rank, and watched his confidence collapse. but something in her wanted to test him, to see how he treated those he thought were beneath him. "I'm observing," she said simply. "Observing what, exactly?" His tone was clipped, impatient. "You're in the way. This area's for personnel with clearance. I don't care who sent you. You can't loiter here." Her voice remained calm, but her words held quiet authority. "Captain, I assure you, I have clearance." He frowned, jaw tightening. "Then show it." She looked at him steadily. "I don't need to." The arrogance in him flared. "Ma'am, this isn't optional. You either step out of this area, or I'll have security escort you." The onlookers exchanged uneasy glances. No one dared intervene. They didn't know who she was, but something about her composure made them uncomfortable. For a long moment, Elena said nothing. Then she exhaled softly and took a single step back. "Very well, Captain," she said. "You're in charge here, aren't you?" Ryan nodded, mistaking her composure for submission. "That's right." "Then continue doing your job," she said. "I'll stay out of your way." He gestured toward the exit. "Good. Let's keep it that way." She walked off the tarmac slowly, the weight of countless eyes following her. Some felt pity. Others smirked. To them, she looked like a staffer who'd been put in her place. To Ryan, it was a small victory, enforcing order, keeping things efficient. To Elena, it was a test passed, not his, but hers. She'd learned everything she needed to know about the man. Later, she stood by the edge of the runway, watching an aircraft take off. Her expression was unreadable. The sound of turbines roared through her chest as she recalled her years commanding men like him. Bold, talented, fearless, but blind to the quiet strength around them. "Still the same," she murmured. "Different ranks, same pride." As the C-17 disappeared into the horizon, she turned and walked toward the administrative building. Inside, the base commander, Admiral Thomas Rourke, was waiting in his office. "Colonel Brooks," he said, rising as she entered. "I wasn't expecting you for another hour." "I arrived early," she replied. "Wanted to get a feel for the team." Rourke smiled knowingly. "And how are they?" "Capable," she said. Then, after a beat, "A few could use a reminder about respect." Rourke chuckled. "Let me guess, Mercer?" Her eyebrow lifted. "You know him well." "I know his type," the Admiral said. "One of our best pilots. Brilliant, but overconfident." Elena folded her arms. "Then he's exactly the kind I like working with. Confidence can be reshaped. Arrogance can be humbled." Rourke grinned. "You sound like you've already made your impression." "Not yet," she said quietly, a faint smile forming. "But I will." Outside, Ryan leaned against a fuel truck, sipping from a bottle of water. A young pilot approached him. "Heard you kicked someone out earlier," the pilot said, grinning. "Admin staff?" Ryan shrugged, smirking. "Probably some contractor trying to look important. She was wandering around restricted zones." "Good catch," the other pilot said. "Command loves a man who enforces rules." Ryan nodded, proud of himself. But something about her eyes, calm, piercing, lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the strange sense that he'd misjudged her. "Yeah," he muttered. "Good catch." That evening, as the sun sank over the Pacific, Elena stood alone on the observation deck overlooking the base. The runway lights glowed beneath her like a constellation of stars. She could hear faint laughter from the mess hall in the distance. No doubt about her. She didn't mind. She'd faced worse than mockery, bullets, betrayal, loss. Tomorrow, they'd all know who she was. Not because she demanded it, but because leadership has a way of revealing itself when the stakes rise. As the waves crashed softly below, she smiled to herself and whispered, "Let them underestimate me tonight. Tomorrow, They'll remember my name. Captain Ryan Mercer believed there were two kinds of people on a base, those who flew and those who stayed out of the way. Flying was everything to him. The roar of engines, the precision of formation, the way a jet cut through the morning sky, it was his language, his heartbeat. He joined the Navy not just to serve, but to soar. And after years of missions, commendations, and flight hours logged over war zones, Ryan Mercer had become a name that carried weight. But with accomplishment came something darker, a quiet pride that hardened into arrogance. To him, command was about skill, not titles. He respected those who proved themselves in the cockpit, not the ones who strutted around with ranks and ribbons earned behind desks. His squadron admired him. Some even feared him. They called him Falcon, a pilot who didn't just follow orders, but redefined them mid-air if he believed he could do better. And most times, he could. That morning, the airbase shimmered under the California sun as Ryan's crew prepared for a simulation flight. The mission, to coordinate closely with Navy ground support, part of a larger joint training program. The same program, unbeknownst to him, that Colonel Elena Brooks had been sent overseas. He was already irritated. Coordination meant more briefings, more procedures, and more higher-ups pretending to understand how flying worked. "Falcon, your Seahawks refueled and systems are green," a technician called out. "Copy that," Ryan replied, running a hand along the aircraft's frame like a mechanic inspecting a classic car. "Make sure the backup nav is since this time. I'm not repeating last week's mess." "Yes, sir." He checked his watch. 20 minutes until takeoff. That's when he saw her again. The same woman from earlier, the one he'd kicked off the runway, was walking toward the hangar, clipboard in hand. No uniform, no visible ID, just quiet purpose. Ryan groaned. Oh, great. Not her again. He grabbed his flight gloves, tossed them on the bench, and marched toward her. "Excuse me," he called, his voice sharp. "Didn't we already talk about this?" Elena looked up, meeting his gaze with calm eyes. "Good morning, Captain Mercer." He blinked. "She knows my name?" "Yeah, morning." "Didn't I tell you to stay clear of restricted zones?" "You did," she replied evenly. "But I have authorization to observe this morning's prep." "From who?" "Command?" He crossed his arms. Hung. You know how many times I've heard that line? If command wants to observe, they send someone in uniform, not. He gestured vaguely. Whatever this is supposed to be. There was a moment of silence. A couple of airmen nearby froze, pretending not to listen, but unable to look away. Elena tilted her head slightly. "You don't think someone without a uniform can have authority, Captain?" Ryan gave a short laugh. "Look, I'm sure you're great at paperwork or logistics or whatever it is you do. But this area is high security. You being here creates confusion. So please, for both our sakes, step back behind the barrier." Her tone remained soft, but her words carried weight. "You're assuming I don't belong because of what I'm wearing." "I'm enforcing safety protocol," he snapped back. "No," she said quietly. "You're enforcing ego." The words hit like a strike to the chest, but he didn't show it. "I don't have time for this." "You're done here." He turned, signaling to a nearby guard. "Escort her out, please." The young security officer hesitated, glancing between them. He didn't recognize Elena either, but something about the tension made him uneasy. "That won't be necessary," Elena said before the guard could move. "I'll leave." She walked away without another word, her calmness unsettling. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Ryan exhaled and muttered, "Unbelievable. Who was that?" One of his pilots asked. "No idea," he said. "Some admin lady who thinks she runs the place." They laughed lightly, but it was hollow. Even Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something about her wasn't normal. Later that day, Ryan sat in the mess hall with his team, Lieutenant Sam Peters and Warrant Officer Diaz, both solid flyers, both loyal to him. "So what's with the attitude?" Peters asked, stirring his coffee. "You've been scowling since morning." Ryan shrugged. "Just tired of civilians wandering into military zones. If command wants oversight, fine, but send someone who knows what they're looking at. Not some random woman with a clipboard." Diaz raised an eyebrow. "What if she's not random?" Ryan smirked. "Trust me, I know authority when I see it." "She didn't have it." Peters chuckled. "Well, word's going around. They said a visitor from Naval Command is here to lead the joint training. Some high-ranking officer. Maybe she's your clipboard lady." Ryan laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "Right. A high-ranking officer walking around in jeans and sneakers? Please. If that's the case, the Navy's gone soft." But even as he joked, a part of him, the part that remembered the steel in her voice, wondered if he was wrong. At that very moment, across the base, Admiral Rourke and Elena were reviewing personnel files. "Mercer," Rourke said, tapping his pen against the folder. "One of the most talented pilots I've seen in a decade, but his ego flies faster than his aircraft," Elena finished. Rourke smirked. "You noticed. I did. You want me to address it before tomorrow's briefing?" She shook her head. "No, I'll handle it my way." Rourke leaned back. "You're not angry?" Elena smiled faintly. "I've been underestimated before, Admiral. It's one of my favorite advantages." He laughed quietly. "Remind me never to underestimate you." The next morning, Ryan walked into the mission briefing room, yawning slightly, a coffee in one hand. The entire task force had been called for a general meeting regarding the upcoming operation. He noticed some unfamiliar faces, special operations personnel, intelligence officers, and a few SEALs. The room buzzed with low conversation. Ryan dropped into a chair, confident as always. "Who's leading this circus?" he asked Peters beside him. "Not sure," Peters said. "Command mentioned a new coordinator for naval special warfare." Ryan smirked. "Great. Another bureaucrat who's never flown a mile telling me how to do my job." Before Peters could reply, the base commander stepped up to the podium. "Attention!" The chatter stopped. "Ladies and gentlemen," the commander began, "today we begin preparations for Operation Deep Current, a coordinated effort between naval aviation and special warfare units. This mission will test our precision, communication, and trust." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he continued, "It's my honor to introduce the officer in charge of this entire operation. Please welcome Colonel Elena Brooks." The name hit the room like thunder. Ryan froze. The clipboard woman, the one he'd ordered off the runway, stepped through the door, now in full uniform. The gold insignia on her collar gleamed. Medals lined her chest. Every conversation in the room died instantly. Elena's eyes swept the audience calmly, landing on him for only a fraction of a second, enough to make his heart stop. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear, commanding. "I'm Colonel Brooks. Some of you already met me yesterday, though you may not have realized it." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd, but she didn't smile. She continued, "In this operation, rank doesn't just mean authority. It means accountability. Each of you will be tested, not by how fast you fly or how loud you command, but by how well you listen, adapt, and respect the people around you." Ryan swallowed hard, trying to avoid her gaze. She ended the briefing with a single line that hit him like a strike. "Arrogance can crash a mission faster than enemy fire. I expect none of it under my command." When the meeting ended, Ryan stayed seated, motionless. The room slowly emptied. Peters leaned in, whispering, "So? That's her?" Ryan's voice was low. "Yeah. What are you gonna do?" He exhaled heavily. Hope she forgets yesterday. But deep down, he knew she wouldn't. And worse, he didn't want her to. Because for the first time in his career, Captain Ryan Mercer had met someone whose authority wasn't loud or showy. It was silent, steady, and unshakable. And that kind of power terrified him. The morning after the briefing, the entire base seemed to hum with a new energy, or maybe it was tension. The kind that slithered beneath conversation, coloring every glance and whisper. By now, everyone had heard the story. The arrogant pilot. The civilian woman. The reveal. Word had spread through the airbase like wildfire. Captain Ryan Mercer had thrown out Colonel Elena Brooks, the SEAL officer now commanding their mission. It started in the cafeteria line, then moved to the hangars, then the barracks. By the time the sun climbed over the Pacific, it was legend. "Did you hear?" The colonel was disguised when Mercer kicked her out. He thought she was logistics staff. Can you imagine? She didn't even say anything, just walked off. And now she's his boss. The gossip carried an electric thrill, part disbelief, part anticipation. Nobody dared mention it near Elena, of course. Her composed, focused demeanor left no room for nonsense. But when she walked through the halls, people straightened. When she spoke, conversations ceased. And when she passed Mercer, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Ryan had barely slept that night. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. Her calm face, her stillness, her words, "You're enforcing ego." He'd brushed her off then, but now those words burned through him like a slow fire. He'd made mistakes before, every pilot had, but never one that humiliated him this deeply. The next morning, he arrived early at the hangar, hoping to work before anyone else showed up. The sound of seagulls echoed over the flight line as he walked past the helicopters. But solitude didn't last long. Captain Mercer. He turned. Lieutenant Sam Peters jogged over, holding 2 coffees. "You're up early. Trying to redeem yourself?" Ryan scowled. "Not funny." Peters grinned sheepishly. "Come on, Nan. Everyone's talking about it. You've officially gone viral, Navy edition." Ryan rubbed his temples. "Yeah, thanks for the reminder." "Look, don't sweat it," Peters said. "You didn't know who she was." "That's not the point," Ryan muttered. "It's about how I acted. I disrespected someone, not because of what she did, but because of what I thought she wasn't." Peters blinked. "That's surprisingly self-aware." "Shut up," Ryan said, half smiling despite himself. But deep down, he wasn't laughing. He prided himself on instinct, reading a room, assessing people instantly. But he'd missed something obvious about her. He'd seen only surface. And that realization made him uncomfortable in a way no failed flight ever had. Later that morning, the officers gathered again in the mission briefing room. The atmosphere was sharper now. Crisp uniforms, stiff backs, nervous silence. Everyone wanted to make a good impression in front of Colonel Brooks. Elena entered precisely at 0800, her movements calm and deliberate. The moment she stepped inside, conversation ceased. She placed her folder on the podium and looked over the assembled officers. "Good morning," she began. "Yesterday was about introductions. Today we talk about execution." Her voice carried the weight of command, confident but measured, firm without aggression. She spoke of coordination between air units and SEAL teams, emphasizing precision, communication, and respect. Every sentence carried purpose. "Every pilot here," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room, "will work under direct coordination with ground command. That means listening first, acting second. You'll be flying over zones where seconds decide lives. Ryan sat near the back, trying not to meet her eyes. But when her gaze crossed the room, he swore she looked directly at him, just for a heartbeat. Some of you, she continued, are used to working independently. That ends now. This mission isn't about ego. It's about discipline. A few officers shifted uncomfortably. Ryan felt the sting of the words, because they weren't abstract. They were aimed. When the meeting ended, Elena dismissed the room. Most officers filtered out quickly, whispering lowly. Ryan tried to do the same, but a voice stopped him. Captain Mercer. He froze, slowly turned. Elena stood by the podium, flipping through her folder without looking up. A moment of your time. He swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. The room was empty now, except for them. Her presence calm, his uneasy. She closed the folder. I trust you've reviewed the mission parameters. Yes, ma'am. I have. Good, she said. Then you understand your role in coordinating air cover for SEAL Team 5. Yes, ma'am, he repeated, trying to sound steady. She studied him silently for a moment. Captain, she said finally, how long have you served? 13 years, ma'am. And in that time, have you learned to judge people by appearance? His jaw tightened. No, ma'am. Good, she said, stepping closer. Then perhaps yesterday was an anomaly? Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was calm, surgical. Yes, ma'am, he said quietly. I was out of line. Her eyes softened just slightly. Out of line is forgivable. Arrogance isn't, especially when it blinds you to who's standing beside you. He nodded. Understood. Good, she said again. Because arrogance kills faster than bullets in our line of work. You may be a fine pilot, Captain, but leadership requires more than control. It requires awareness. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, not as superior and subordinate, but as two soldiers from different worlds, both shaped by the same unforgiving code. Then she turned back to her notes. You're dismissed. Ryan hesitated. Ma'am, I just want to say I'm sorry. She didn't look up. Show me, Captain. Don't tell me. He nodded once, saluted, and left. Outside, the corridor buzzed with movement. Officers passed him, some nodding, others whispering behind their hands. Ryan ignored them. He didn't care about the gossip anymore, not after facing her directly. What struck him most wasn't her authority. It was her composure. She didn't humiliate him, didn't flaunt her power, didn't even raise her voice. She led by presence alone. It was unnerving, and it was inspiring. That night, the mess hall was unusually quiet. Even the chatter of pilots had softened. Ryan sat with Peters and Diaz, staring into his meal without appetite. So, Diaz said finally, did she chew you out? Ryan shook his head. No, she didn't need to. What do you mean? Peters asked. He leaned back, eyes distant. You ever have someone correct you without raising their voice? That's what it felt like. Like she didn't have to prove she was in charge. She just was. The others exchanged glances. Peters smirked. You sound impressed. I am, Ryan admitted. And embarrassed. Diaz nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's good. Keeps you grounded. Ryan gave a dry laugh. Yeah, maybe that's exactly what I needed. Across the base, in her quarters, Elena sat by the window overlooking the harbor. The faint lights of ships twinkled on the horizon. She'd been reading through reports, but found herself pausing, thinking of Mercer. She had seen men like him all her life, brilliant, bold, but consumed by ego. Some never learned. But occasionally, one did. And those few became exceptional leaders. She hoped Mercer would be one of them. Picking up her notebook, she jotted a few words. Notes for tomorrow's leadership briefing. Authority isn't about volume. It's about steadiness. The louder a person speaks, the less they're usually heard. She set the pen down, exhaled softly, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would test them all. The following day, as dawn broke over the ocean, a training exercise was scheduled. Air coordination drills with the SEALs. Elena would be observing. Mercer would be flying. The hangar buzzed with energy as crews prepared. Engines roared to life and comms crackled. Ryan strapped into his Seahawk, his nerves sharp but focused. As his rotors spun, he heard her voice through the comms, calm and clipped. Eagle 1, this is command. You're clear for takeoff. Show me what discipline looks like today. Her words weren't just instructions. They were a challenge. Ryan smiled faintly under his helmet. Roger that, command. Let's show you what respect in the skies looks like. As the helicopter lifted into the morning light, he felt something shift, not just in the air, but in himself. For the first time, Captain Ryan Mercer wasn't flying to impress. He was flying to earn. The next morning, the base was unusually quiet, almost tense. Word had spread about Colonel Elena Brooks, the woman Captain Ryan Mercer had humiliated the day before. Some officers whispered nervously, while others pretended not to care, though their curiosity burned beneath the surface. Inside the briefing hangar, activity hummed at a low, deliberate pace. Rows of pilots and SEAL operators checked gear, ran through last-minute procedures, and double-checked aircraft. The air smelled of fuel, polished metal, and the faint tang of sea salt. Everyone could feel something in the atmosphere, a shift in expectation, a subtle electricity that only comes when someone legendary walks among ordinary people. Ryan leaned against his helicopter, his helmet under one arm, scanning the room. He couldn't shake the memory of Elena's calm authority. He had pride in himself, but pride didn't feel good this morning. It felt fragile, exposed. And then he heard it. Attention. The hangar fell silent instantly. Footsteps clicked sharply on the concrete floor. The commanding officer, Admiral Thomas Rourke, strode to the center, his face unreadable. He paused, then gestured toward the double doors at the end of the hangar. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying through the vast space. Today, we meet the officer in charge of Operation Deep Current. The person responsible for coordinating air and ground forces, the one ensuring our mission succeeds. Colonel Elena Brooks. The doors opened slowly. A hush fell over the room. Ryan's heart thumped in his chest. Elena walked in. But this time, she was no longer the casually dressed visitor he had dismissed. Her uniform was immaculate. Deep navy, polished insignia, gold stripes marking her rank on her sleeves. SEAL tridents gleamed above her left breast pocket. Every medal, ribbon, and commendation gleamed under the harsh hangar lights. Her posture was straight, her steps deliberate, each movement radiating authority. Ryan felt his stomach drop. The entire room watched as she walked past rows of personnel, scanning quietly, efficiently, calculating who was alert, who was distracted, who was ready. Her gaze stopped on Ryan for only a fraction of a second, and yet he felt it pierce through him. He swallowed hard. She's a colonel. A SEAL colonel. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. The woman he had arrogantly kicked off the tarmac? The one he had thought was a low-level staffer wandering into restricted zones? She outranked him by several levels, and she wasn't just any officer. She was the very heart of the Navy's Special Warfare Command. The chatter that had filled the hangar moments ago died completely. Whispers halted mid-word. Even the mechanics stopped what they were doing, as if the air itself had stiffened. Admiral Rourke gestured toward a podium. Colonel Brooks will brief us on today's objectives. All personnel, pay attention. This mission is complex and requires your full focus. Colonel? Elena stepped to the podium. Her voice was calm, yet every syllable carried weight. "Good morning," she said. "I trust you've all reviewed yesterday's notes. Today, we begin preparations for coordination exercises between air and ground teams, with a focus on precision, communication, and execution. Mistakes in these drills will cost lives in real operations, so attention and discipline are paramount." Ryan felt his own hands tighten into fists at his sides. Pride had evaporated, replaced by shame and awe. "Captain Mercer," Elena continued, scanning the room like a hawk, "you will lead aerial coordination. You will follow my directives precisely. Deviation is not tolerated." Ryan forced himself to lift his chin. "Understood, Nam," he said quietly, trying to mask the shock and embarrassment he felt. Elena didn't smile, but her gaze softened ever so slightly. "Good. Let's begin." During the briefing, she moved seamlessly between slides, diagrams, and detailed tactical maps. Her knowledge of both air and SEAL operations was encyclopedic, and her ability to coordinate multiple moving pieces left Ryan riveted. Every command, every suggested adjustment, every note she made was measured and deliberate. She paused at one point and said, "Leadership is not about your uniform or your rank. It's about earning trust, respecting skill, and valuing every member of your team. Captain Mercer, yesterday was a lesson. I trust it will guide your conduct moving forward." Ryan's mouth went dry. He nodded, unable to respond verbally. Her calm authority was a mirror, reflecting everything he had assumed about power and strength, and how wrong he had been. Around the hangar, whispers of her legend began to spread further. A SEAL operator muttered to his colleague, "That's her? The clipboard lady? Wow." Another pilot shook his head, barely audible. "I knew she was someone important, but didn't expect this level of command." Even Admiral Rourke watched her with quiet satisfaction. This was exactly the presence he had expected from a colonel of her caliber. After the briefing, the task force moved outside for pre-flight coordination. Ryan followed, still uneasy. He noticed Elena walking calmly among the SEALs, observing communication drills, noting efficiency and timing, her voice low but commanding when corrections were needed. Ryan's crew attempted to go about their tasks as usual, but it was impossible to ignore her. Every pilot, every SEAL operator, even the technicians, seemed to move with a mixture of reverence and caution. Finally, she approached Ryan directly. The wind caught her hair as she stepped close to him. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the hum of nearby helicopters. "Captain Mercer," she said, her voice steady and precise. "The lesson from yesterday is simple. Authority is not earned through intimidation. It is demonstrated through competence and respect. Follow the plan exactly as outlined. I will be monitoring all actions." Ryan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes held his for a moment longer. "Good. Let's make today productive. Lives may depend on your focus." Then she moved on, her presence leaving a faint but palpable weight in the air. Ryan couldn't shake the mixture of emotions swirling in him. Disbelief, embarrassment, awe. The woman he had underestimated was not only commanding the mission, but commanding him, without raising her voice, without shouting, without resorting to theatrics. It was humbling, and it was infuriating. During the drills, every decision he made was scrutinized, every maneuver measured against her expectations. When he hesitated, she corrected him quietly, but firmly. When he acted decisively and accurately, she nodded once and moved on. Her approval was rare, but precise. By the end of the day, Ryan felt a strange shift within himself. Pride had been replaced by humility. Respect had taken root. The woman he had once dismissed as a low-level staffer was now the standard he aspired to meet, not because she demanded it, but because she embodied it. As the sun set over the Pacific, Ryan sat on the edge of his helicopter, helmet removed, sweat drying on his forehead. He stared out across the flight line at the lights reflecting off the water, thinking about the arrogance that had nearly cost him his credibility. He glanced back at the hangar. Elena stood inside, reviewing maps, coordinating with SEALs, her posture calm, her authority unspoken but undeniable. She had turned what could have been a humiliation into a teaching moment, not publicly, not with anger, but through sheer competence and presence. Ryan's jaw tightened. I underestimated her. And worse, he realized he had been wrong about himself. For the first time, Captain Ryan Mercer understood that true leadership didn't roar. It didn't demand attention. It was quiet. It was unwavering. And it was absolute. He exhaled slowly, letting the cool evening wind wash over him. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would fly differently. Not to prove himself to her, but to honor the standard she had set. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he smiled faintly, acknowledging a truth he hadn't accepted before. This woman, this SEAL colonel, hidden in plain sight yesterday, had already changed him. And he wasn't sure he'd ever see the world the same way again. The early morning fog clung to the tarmac like a damp blanket, muted the hum of engines, and softened the harsh outlines of the helicopters. Even the Pacific breeze seemed hesitant, as if it knew the tension that lingered in the air. For Captain Ryan Mercer, the day ahead felt heavier than any flight he had ever faced. He arrived at the briefing hangar, expecting the usual pre-mission chatter. Instead, the room was quieter than normal. Officers, SEAL operators, and aircrew moved with a mixture of focus and apprehension. They all knew the woman who now commanded them. Colonel Elena Brooks had already earned their respect before a single word was spoken. Ryan shifted nervously in his boots as she entered. Her uniform gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Gold insignia, polished SEAL tridents, and medals lined her chest, a visual confirmation of the legend he had brushed off the day before. She didn't glance at him immediately, but when she did, her gaze was calm, unwavering, and perceptive. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice carrying naturally across the room. "Today, we continue our training exercises for Operation Deep Current. This isn't just about flying. This isn't just about tactics. This is about leadership, understanding responsibility, respecting your teammates, and recognizing the weight of decisions in the field." Ryan exhaled sharply. She had already zeroed in on the lesson he needed before any operation had begun. The exercise was simple in theory. Ryan's team would provide aerial cover while SEAL teams navigated a simulated hostile zone, extracting hostages from a mock compound. The complexity lay in execution, perfect timing, precise communication, and zero tolerance for mistakes. "Falcon," Elena said quietly as she approached him after the briefing, using his call sign. "You're leading the flight team. I expect coordination, not heroics. Can you do that?" Ryan nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze softened for the briefest moment. "Good. Remember, leadership is more than flying fast or taking risks. It's knowing your team, anticipating needs, and respecting everyone's role, even if you disagree with it." He swallowed, feeling a weight settle over his shoulders. Her words weren't just advice. They were a challenge. The operation began with helicopters lifting off in formation, engines vibrating like wild beasts contained within their metal shells. Ryan guided his team over the Pacific, altitude and speed, calibrated precisely. From above, the mock compound appeared small and deceptively simple, a lesson in perspective he already understood, but had often ignored. "Eagle One, this is command. You are approaching the extraction zone. Remember, timing is everything. Keep comms open. Watch your 6. Trust your ground team. Her voice crackled through the radio. Calm, clear, commanding without being overbearing. Ryan glanced down at the SEAL team, moving across the ground below. Their movements were synchronized, precise, and lethal. He realized in that instant that leadership wasn't about orders. It was about creating an environment where excellence could emerge naturally. He adjusted his flight path, then corrected a minor misalignment in the wing formation of his team. Elana's voice came again. Falcon, excellent correction. Maintain focus and anticipate the unexpected. Trust your team, and they will trust you. Ryan's chest tightened. This wasn't just about flying. It was a lesson in humility. He'd spent years believing that skill alone commanded respect. Now, he understood that respect must be earned through awareness, restraint, and foresight. The first extraction went smoothly. SEALs moved into the compound, neutralizing threats with precision, while Ryan's aerial support coordinated flawlessly. But the second scenario introduced a complication: simulated enemy fire from multiple directions, forcing Ryan to make split-second decisions. Falcon, Elena's voice cut through the comms. Adjust your altitude in vector by 10 degrees. SEALs on the north flank are encountering heavy resistance. Do not overcompensate. Keep your team coordinated. Ryan's instinct screamed to pull a maneuver he would normally attempt in real combat. A risky, aggressive move that could have impressed anyone watching. But her words grounded him. He adjusted carefully, keeping his team aligned, preserving the simulated operation. When the SEAL team completed the second extraction, Alana's voice was calm over the radio. Good work, Falcon. You led with discipline. That is leadership. Ryan exhaled slowly, the weight on his chest lifting slightly. He had survived, not because of daring, but because of control, foresight, and respect for the chain of command. After landing, the task force assembled for a debriefing. Sweat coated Ryan's forehead, his uniform slightly disheveled, but his eyes were sharper, more attentive than ever. Elena stood at the front, reviewing the simulation data and noting both successes and errors. Observation, she began, is key to understanding leadership. Every pilot, every SEAL, every crew member has unique strengths. A good leader recognizes those strengths and leverages them. A great leader recognizes weaknesses without condemnation and ensures the team functions despite them. Her gaze swept the room. Captain Mercer, yesterday was a lesson. Today was practice. Tomorrow, I expect excellence under scrutiny. Leadership is earned through actions, not assumptions. Respect is not demanded. It is demonstrated. Ryan's hands tightened into fists. I've been blind. He had believed rank was enough to command respect. He had believed skill alone justified arrogance. But watching Elena coordinate with every operator, every pilot, without yelling or domineering, he understood the truth. Leadership was influence, humility, and example, not bravado. Later that afternoon, Elena called Ryan aside. They walked along the edge of the runway, engines humming in the background. Captain, she began, you're talented. That is undeniable. But talent alone does not make a leader. Ego, unchecked, can destroy teams faster than any enemy. Yesterday, I saw arrogance. Today, I saw potential. Ryan swallowed. Yes, ma'am. I understand. She stopped and faced him fully, her eyes sharp yet measured. Understand this. Leadership is not about who flies the fastest, who scores the most, or who looks the part. It's about seeing value in everyone, even when they appear insignificant, and ensuring their safety and effectiveness. Ryan nodded slowly, absorbing every word. She's teaching me more in a single conversation than any instructor ever has. Now, she continued, we will run the final scenario. I expect coordination, restraint, and adaptability. Follow orders, but anticipate consequences. Lead with your mind, not just your instincts. Yes, ma'am, he said firmly, a renewed sense of purpose settling over him. The final scenario tested every aspect of the operation. Precision flying, communication, threat assessment, and split-second decision-making. Ryan felt the weight of responsibility, but instead of panic or pride, he acted with calm focus. Every decision reflected the lesson Elena had instilled. Respect the team, anticipate outcomes, and lead with clarity. When the scenario concluded successfully, Alana's calm voice over the comms was the only acknowledgement. Excellent execution, Falcon. Leadership demonstrated. Trust maintained. Team intact. Ryan exhaled, relief washing over him. For the first time in his career, he understood that leadership was not about proving himself, but about serving those he led. That evening, the base was quiet. Ryan sat alone on a bench overlooking the airfield. The sunset painted the horizon in shades of orange and crimson. He watched as Elena moved among the crews, checking equipment, giving brief instructions, her authority unspoken but omnipresent. He thought back to yesterday, how easily he had dismissed her, how blind he had been. And he thought of today, how much he had learned simply by following her guidance and observing her leadership. A sense of humility and respect washed over him. The woman he had once thought was just a clipboard-wielding staffer had shown him what true command looked like. Calm, calculated, and earned through action and presence, not assumption. Ryan smiled faintly to himself. I will never underestimate her again. Dawn broke over the horizon with a fiery intensity, spilling gold and crimson across the Pacific Ocean. For Captain Ryan Mercer, today was not another training exercise. Today, the operation was live. Not simulated, not a drill, real-time coordination between air and SEAL teams in a high-threat zone. The weight of responsibility pressed against him as he walked to his helicopter. Engines were already humming, mechanics and ground crew moving with precise urgency. He felt the familiar adrenaline of flight, but it was tempered now with focus, humility, and awareness, the lessons Colonel Elena Brooks had instilled. She stood nearby, watching the preparation with her usual composed presence. Her eyes swept the line of pilots and SEAL operators, noting posture, readiness, and mental focus. When they met, her gaze held his for a moment, not accusatory, not condescending, just a silent affirmation that she expected excellence. Falcon, she said quietly as he approached, remember, leadership is not measured by audacity, but by effectiveness. Every decision you make affects the team. Lead with your mind, not your ego. Yes, ma'am, Ryan replied, letting the words sink in fully this time. The mission briefing had been detailed. Intelligence indicated multiple hostile targets in a coastal compound suspected of harboring weapons and insurgent operatives. SEAL teams would infiltrate from the shore, while aerial support provided cover and reconnaissance. Timing and coordination were critical. One misstep could cost lives. Ryan's team took their positions, rotors slicing the morning air. He felt the vibration beneath him, the roar of engines echoing in his chest. In the past, he might have taken risks to impress or assert dominance. Today, he felt something new, clarity and responsibility. Falcon, this is command. Alana's voice crackled through comms, calm and steady. SEALs have reached Point Alpha. Maintain altitude and observation. No unnecessary engagement until instructed. Ryan adjusted the aircraft, noting the positions of his fellow pilots. Each move was deliberate, coordinated, and precise. He reminded himself, she's watching. The team is counting on me. Mistakes aren't acceptable. The first phase went smoothly. SEALs moved undetected across the perimeter, neutralizing surveillance and establishing secure entry points. Ryan provided overwatch, scanning the terrain, coordinating movements, and ensuring no breaches. Eagle 1, your 6 is clear. Maintain formation, Elena instructed. Ryan followed, restraining the impulse to swoop aggressively. Every maneuver he made was measured, calculated to support the team, not showcase personal skill. For the first time, he realized true leadership wasn't about daring feats. It was about enabling success. Suddenly, comms lit up with reports of hostile fire from the north flank. One SEAL team had encountered unexpected resistance. Falcon, Alana's voice cut through. Calm but firm. Adjust vector to provide cover for Team Bravo. Monitor the situation carefully. Do not overextend. Trust your instincts, but defer to your team's needs. Ryan's instincts screamed to dive in, take aggressive action. But her words echoed in his mind. Lead with your mind, not your ego. He adjusted formation subtly, providing the necessary support without overstepping. The SEALs regained control of the situation, neutralizing the threat with minimal risk. Alana's quiet acknowledgement over Combs' well done was enough to send a surge of pride through him, tempered by respect. Midway through the operation, a sudden complication arose. Enemy reinforcements approached from an unexpected direction, threatening to cut off the SEAL extraction point. Ryan had seconds to react. He froze momentarily, but then remembered Elena's lessons. Leadership was not impulsive heroics. It was coordination, foresight, and trust. Eagle 1, adjust altitude to 2,500 feet. Move northeast to intercept potential threats, but maintain communication with SEALs. Timing is critical, Elena instructed. Ryan executed flawlessly, directing his pilots with precision. Every adjustment was calculated, every call carefully modulated. The SEALs proceeded, undetected by the reinforcements, and successfully reached the extraction point. From above, Ryan watched as they loaded onto the helicopters, his chest swelling with a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about personal glory. It was about success, survival, and teamwork. After the operation concluded, Ryan's team landed back at the base. The helicopters settled onto the tarmac with a controlled thrum, engines winding down. Sweat dripped from his brow, his uniform disheveled, but his eyes were clear and sharp. Elena approached, walking across the tarmac with her characteristic calmness. She stopped before him, surveying the results with satisfaction. "Captain Mercer," she said, her voice steady, "you led your team effectively. You demonstrated restraint, coordination, and situational awareness. This is leadership. Well done." Ryan exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you, ma'am." She studied him for a moment longer. "Remember, success isn't measured by personal accolades. It's measured by the team's survival, effectiveness, and trust in each other." "I understand," Ryan said. For the first time, he truly did. The debriefing was thorough. Elena led it herself, dissecting each movement, analyzing every decision, and noting where improvements could be made. Every officer and SEAL operator listened intently, knowing her assessment carried more weight than any medal or title. "Observation is as important as action," she explained. "Understand the consequences of every decision. Anticipate the needs of your team. Respect every role, every skill. Leadership is earned continuously, not assumed by rank." Ryan absorbed every word. He thought back to yesterday, to the moment he had dismissed her as a staffer. The shame of his arrogance mingled with the respect he now felt. She hadn't embarrassed him publicly, hadn't shouted, hadn't humiliated him. Instead, she taught, with calm authority, precision, and patience. He realized something profound. Leadership was not about fear or force. It was about example. As the sun set over the Pacific, the base was quiet. Helicopters rested on the tarmac, the ocean reflecting the fading light. Ryan sat alone, reflecting on the day's events. He thought of Elena, moving among her teams, her posture unwavering, her voice calm yet commanding. He had spent years believing skill alone defined a leader. Now, he understood that humility, awareness, and respect were far more powerful. He smiled faintly, acknowledging the lesson learned. The woman he had underestimated, the SEAL colonel he had dismissed yesterday, had transformed him. Not through reprimand, but through example. For the first time, Captain Ryan Mercer felt the true weight of responsibility and the true meaning of leadership. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges. But he also knew he was no longer the same pilot who had arrogantly thrown someone off the runway. He had flown under fire, learned under fire, and most importantly, grown under fire. And for that, he owed everything to Colonel Elena Brooks. The morning after the live operation, the base carried a different energy. Conversations were hushed but respectful, steps measured, and eyes alert. Even the most casual glances carried an understanding. Colonel Elena Brooks had not only demonstrated authority, but had taught a lesson in leadership the hard way, without raising her voice, without dramatics, without insult. Captain Ryan Mercer walked along the tarmac, the morning fog curling around the helicopters like ghostly sentinels. He felt the weight of yesterday's events still pressing on him, but it was no longer shameful. It was reflective, a heavy, steady pride in learning and growing. As he approached his helicopter, he noticed SEAL teams and aircrew exchanging respectful glances. Whispers carried a quiet excitement. "Did you see how Falcon flew today?" He kept the SEALs coordinated perfectly. Colonel Brooks must be impressed. Ryan smiled faintly to himself. He didn't need to hear the praise. He already knew the truth. Respect wasn't given because of skill alone. It was earned through actions, discipline, and humility. And that day, he had earned a small measure of it. Elena walked alongside him, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the pre-flight checklist. Her presence was calm, measured, and commanding. She glanced at Ryan. "Captain Mercer," she said, voice quiet but precise. "Your performance yesterday demonstrated growth. But remember, leadership is not static. Every mission, every flight, every interaction tests you. Respect must be maintained, earned continuously." Ryan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." Her gaze softened slightly. "Good. Keep in mind that the team's trust is fragile. They follow because they believe you are aware, competent, and reliable. One mistake can erode confidence faster than any criticism." He exhaled. "I won't forget, ma'am. I won't take it for granted." As the teams prepared for a new exercise, Ryan noticed something subtle but significant. The aircrew he had once commanded with casual authority now looked at him differently. Eyes held a hint of expectation, not fear, not skepticism, but measured respect. Pilots and SEALs alike waited for his instructions, not to be dominated, but because they trusted his decisions. It was a quiet transformation, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. Leadership, he realized, was not about control. It was about influence. And Elena had shown him exactly how to cultivate it. The exercise began with helicopters lifting off simultaneously. Ryan led his team with precision, executing every maneuver calmly and deliberately. He coordinated directly with SEAL teams on the ground, anticipating movements, adjusting flight paths, and ensuring every operator was covered. "Falcon," Alana's voice came through comms, "your timing is excellent. Maintain formation and altitude. Anticipate extraction points without being prompted." He followed her guidance, silently noting every adjustment she suggested. Her corrections were subtle but critical, reinforcing her lessons. Awareness, humility, respect, and precise coordination. By the end of the exercise, the operation had run flawlessly. SEAL teams completed their tasks without incident. Helicopters maintained perfect formation, and communication remained clear and constant. Alana's nod of approval over comms was faint but unmistakable. After the exercise, the teams gathered for debriefing. Elena's analysis was meticulous. She pointed out strengths, acknowledged precise execution, and offered constructive feedback on areas needing refinement. Her approach was firm but respectful, challenging but instructive. Ryan watched as the team absorbed her words. Even the most experienced operators listened intently. Every correction she made was intended to improve, not belittle. And every time she highlighted excellence, it reinforced the team's cohesion and trust. When her gaze returned to him, Ryan felt a mixture of humility and pride. She had watched him transform under pressure, from an arrogant, impulsive pilot to a disciplined, aware, and reliable leader. And she had done so without humiliation, without ego, without theatrics. Later, as the sun dipped low over the Pacific, Ryan approached Elena again. The helicopters hummed quietly in the background, engines winding down. "Colonel," he began, hesitant but sincere, "I wanted to thank you. Not just for yesterday or today, but for teaching me. I've been arrogant, and I didn't realize how much I had to learn." She regarded him calmly, her expression unreadable. "Captain Mercer, the lesson isn't about punishment or correction. It's about awareness. Leadership is tested not by authority, but by humility, foresight, and respect. You demonstrated growth. That's what matters." He nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I understand now, and I hope to continue proving myself worthy of the trust the team has placed in me." Elena's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "Then you will continue learning, Captain. Leadership is a lifelong process. Complacency is the enemy." That evening, the mess hall buzzed with a different energy. Ryan walked in with Peters and Diaz, the team's usual banter subdued, but tinged with camaraderie and mutual respect. "You've changed," Peters said quietly, stirring his coffee. "The team notices. Even the SEALs are talking about it." Ryan smirked faintly. "I had a good teacher." Diaz chuckled. "That clipboard lady turned out to be a legend, huh?" Ryan laughed, though it was tinged with humility. "You could say that." He realized that respect wasn't something you demanded or flaunted. It was something cultivated, quietly, through awareness, skill, and the courage to admit mistakes. Elena had shown him that, and he had seen it reflected back in his team's eyes. The next morning, as the base awakened to the crisp air and low hum of engines, Ryan felt different. He moved with purpose, aware of his team, attentive to their needs, and conscious of his own actions. He no longer felt the need to dominate or assert superiority. Leadership had become a responsibility, not a display. Elena walked past him, noting his attentiveness, his coordination, his focus. She offered a slight nod, acknowledgement, not praise. That was enough. In that moment, Ryan understood the true meaning of respect. It wasn't earned by rank, medals, or daring feats. It was earned through action, consideration, and integrity. And under Elena Brooks' guidance, he had finally grasped it. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the tarmac, Ryan prepared for the next exercise. The SEALs moved with precision. Helicopters lifted into the morning air, and Elena observed silently, her presence commanding without demanding attention. Ryan glanced at her once, and for the first time, he felt confident, not in his own ego, but in his ability to lead responsibly, with awareness, discipline, and respect. The transformation was complete. The pilot who had once thrown a high-ranking SEAL officer off the runway was no longer just a pilot. He was a leader, tested by fire, guided by example, and now fully aware of what it meant to earn respect. And in that awareness, Ryan Mercer felt the weight of responsibility, the pride of growth, and the quiet satisfaction of having learned from the very best. The first light of dawn spread across the base like a promise. Helicopters rested in neat rows, rotors glinting with the morning sun, engines silent but ready. Today marked the final phase of Operation Deep Current, the culmination of days of preparation, drills, and real-time coordination. For Captain Ryan Mercer, every step felt heavier, charged with the responsibility of leading his team under the gaze of Colonel Elena Brooks. Elena, as always, moved with quiet authority. Her uniform crisp, insignia polished, medals glinting under the sun. She passed silently among the pilots, inspecting equipment, checking comms, and observing the readiness of each SEAL team. Her eyes briefly met Ryan's, calm and measured, as if reminding him that today would be the ultimate test, not of skill, but of leadership. "Falcon," her voice came over the comms, crisp and clear, "this is the final exercise. Execute with precision. Communicate constantly. Trust your team and act with discipline. Failure is not an option." Ryan nodded under his helmet. The lessons of the past week reverberated through him. Humility, awareness, respect, coordination. He had learned the hard way that leadership was not about ego or speed or daring. It was about the lives of those who depended on him, the trust of those around him, and the example he set with every decision. The helicopters lifted from the tarmac, engines roaring like controlled storms. Ryan's hands gripped the controls firmly but calmly. The formation was tight, calculated, precise. As they flew over the coastal terrain, the SEAL teams below moved with synchronized precision, each operator executing their role flawlessly. "Falcon, maintain altitude and keep comms open," Elena instructed over the radio. "SEALs are on the ground. Observe, anticipate, adjust. Trust your training." Ryan adjusted the flight path, scanning the perimeter. A small squadron of simulated enemy units had been positioned to challenge the teams, creating a complex operational scenario. The success of the mission depended on timing, communication, and coordination, the very lessons Elena had drilled into him. For the first time, he felt not fear, but clarity. He no longer felt the need to prove himself through risky maneuvers or bold stunts. Every action was deliberate, every decision measured, every adjustment guided by discipline rather than ego. As the SEAL teams reached the compound, hostile units opened simulated fire. Ryan's squadron provided overwatch, adjusting angles, guiding team movements, and ensuring complete situational awareness. Every command he gave was concise, deliberate, and precise. No hesitation. No assumption. "Falcon, adjust vector 2 degrees north. SEAL Bravo team is encountering heavy resistance. Provide support, but maintain distance," Elena's voice directed calmly. Ryan executed flawlessly. He didn't act for glory. He acted for the team. The SEALs advanced, neutralized threats, and successfully extracted the mock hostages. Every move reinforced the principle Elena had taught. Leadership was about enabling others to succeed, not showcasing personal prowess. By the time the teams regrouped at the extraction point, Ryan's flight squadron had maintained perfect formation, executed each maneuver flawlessly, and communicated without error. The mission, though simulated, had tested the full measure of his leadership, and he had passed. When they returned to base, Elena's presence was steady and commanding. She walked along the tarmac, observing each helicopter land and each SEAL operator disembark. Ryan followed, careful to maintain composure, aware of the lingering weight of responsibility. "Captain Mercer," she said finally, as the teams gathered, "today, you demonstrated what I've been trying to teach all week. Awareness, discipline, coordination, and respect, not just for your team, but for every individual who relies on you. Leadership is not about bravado. It's about trust, competence, and example. Ryan exhaled slowly. For the first time, he truly understood. The mistakes of the past, the arrogance, the misjudgment, the assumption, had been washed away by lessons learned under fire. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, voice steady. "I understand now. It's not about proving myself. It's about serving my team and earning their trust." Alana studied him for a long moment, her gaze sharp but approving. "Exactly. And remember, leadership is never complete. You will face new challenges, new teams, new operations. Maintain humility, awareness, and respect. That is how you lead effectively." Later that evening, Ryan walked through the hangar. The air smelled of fuel and metal, but it also carried a sense of accomplishment. SEAL operators and pilots exchanged nods and quiet words of respect. Where once there had been whispered doubts about his abilities, there was now acknowledgement, not loud, not performative, but genuine. He had earned the trust of his team, and it felt unlike anything he had ever experienced. He noticed Elena observing from across the hangar. She wasn't praising him with words or accolades. Her approval was subtle. A brief nod, a faint tightening of the eyes, but it carried weight. He realized that the truest form of respect is quiet, earned through consistent action and integrity, not demanded or assumed. Ryan paused by one of the helicopters and removed his helmet. He exhaled, letting the cool evening air wash over him. He reflected on the journey of the past week, the initial arrogance that had led him to dismiss Elena, the embarrassment of being corrected, the intensity of the live operation, and the lessons absorbed under her guidance. He realized something profound. He had not only grown as a pilot, but as a leader, as a human being. Elena had shown him the power of humility, the importance of respect, and the responsibility that true authority carries. He had learned to listen before acting, to observe before judging, and to lead by example rather than ego. That night, as the base settled into quiet routines, Ryan sat with Peters and Diaz in the mess hall. Conversation was light, but underneath it lay a shared understanding. "You've changed, Falcon," Peters said, shaking his head. "The team notices. Even the SEALs are talking about it." Ryan smiled faintly. "I had a good teacher." Diaz grinned. "That clipboard lady turned out to be a legend, huh?" Ryan laughed softly, the sound tinged with humility. "More than I ever imagined, and more than I deserved to underestimate." He realized that true leadership wasn't about asserting dominance or flaunting skill. It was about awareness, discipline, and integrity, qualities that Elena had exemplified every day, and he had finally understood how to embody them himself. The following morning, Ryan watched as Elena moved among the SEALs and pilots, her presence commanding respect without a word raised. She inspected equipment, observed interactions, and guided team exercises with quiet authority. Ryan felt a sense of gratitude and clarity. The woman he had misjudged, dismissed, and underestimated had taught him a lesson far greater than any technical skill. She had taught him the essence of leadership, and in doing so, had changed the course of his career and his life. As helicopters lifted from the tarmac, engines humming in perfect unison, Ryan felt a quiet resolve. He would never forget the lessons learned under fire. He would lead with awareness, humility, and integrity, and he would honor the trust and respect of every person who relied on him, just as Elena had taught. For the first time, Captain Ryan Mercer felt not only confident in his skill, but confident in his ability to lead. He looked up at Elena, standing calmly on the tarmac, and silently acknowledged her impact. The mission was complete. The lesson was sealed. and the pilot who had once misjudged a high-ranking SEAL officer had become a leader worthy of his team's trust.